So here's a question we all wrestle with. How should the church actually engage with the world? Are we supposed to be out there changing laws, or should we focus on changing hearts? Well, today, we're going to dig into the work of one of the most important and, let's be honest, provocative Western theologians of our time, Stanley Hauerwas. And he has a pretty surprising answer to that very question. We're going to unpack his vision for what Christian social ethics is all about. And we're diving into his major work, A Community of Character. Now, to make his point, Hauerwas doesn't start with some abstract philosophy or, a bunch of policy papers. No, he does something way more creative. He starts with a story about rabbits. And yeah, that brings us to the big question, right? What on earth can a children's book about a bunch of rabbits teach us about the mission of the church? I know, it sounds a little bit strange, but for Hauerwas, this is the key to understanding everything. Okay, let's jump in. So what Hauerwas does is he takes this classic novel, Watership Down, and he uses it as this powerful parable. He argues that the different rabbit communities in the story, they call them warrens, are actually perfect examples, perfect archetypes for three different ways that societies, and yes, even churches, can really lose their way. First up, you've got Sandalford. This was the rabbit's home warren. It seemed great on the surface, very traditional, stable, built on loyalty to a really strong leader. But, they got comfortable. So comfortable, in fact, that when one of their own had a prophetic vision warning them they were all about to be destroyed, the leader just brushed it off. They had traded their own story, their own vigilance, for a false sense of security. And in the end, it destroyed them. Then our heroes stumble upon this other place, Cowslip's Warren, and it looks like a liberal paradise, total individual freedom. But it was all a lie. These rabbits had no history, no stories to bind them together. See, they had it easy because a farmer was feeding them, but he was also setting traps among them. And to keep their comfortable life going, they all entered this dark, unspoken agreement to lure strangers in, just to better the odds that someone else would get caught in a snare. And finally, there's the Warren of Ephrathah. Now, this place was a full-blown totalitarian state. It was organized down to the last detail for maximum security by its terrifying leader, General Woundward. And it worked. It was perfectly safe. No predator could ever get to them. But in achieving that total control, the rabbits lost the very thing that made them rabbits. They lived without any freedom, without any joy, and ultimately without any hope. Okay, so when you lay it all out like this, you can really start to see what Hauerwas is getting at. In Sandalford, a good thing, loyalty, became a bad thing, complacency, a powerful warning for us not to put our ultimate trust in any human leader. In Cowslip's Warren, freedom became a mask for deception, a critique of any society that puts individual desire above shared truth. And in Ephrathah, the desire for security led to absolute tyranny. See the pattern? Each community failed because its core value, whatever it was, got disconnected from a real, truthful story about who they were meant to be. All right, so if those are the cautionary tales, what's the alternative? What does the right way look like? Well, Hauerwas points us to the community that the heroes of the story eventually build for themselves. The Warren of Watership Down. He calls this a community of character. And here's the kicker. What defines it isn't a political system or a set of rules. It's a shared identity. They become a real community by going through this incredible adventure together and by constantly telling and retelling their foundational stories, the myths of their great hero, Elorira. That story is what gives them the skills, the virtues they need to live in a world that is, let's face it, fundamentally dangerous. And you can see this play out in everything they do. Their leader, a rabbit named Hazel, he's not the biggest or the strongest, but he's the one everyone trusts, the one who takes responsibility. The whole community works because it relies on the different gifts of every single member. Fiver's strange insight, Bigwig's incredible strength. And get this, they're open to strangers. They even welcome former enemies and make them friends. Most of all, they live with this deep sense of hope, trusting in their story instead of trying to control every little outcome. So, by now, I'm sure you can see where he's headed with all of this, right? This whole amazing parable of the rabbits, well, it's the setup for his central theological argument about the real mission of the church. Let's take a look at how he makes that turn. And boom, here it is. This is the heart of the whole thing. Hauerwas says the primary social task of the church is to be itself. That is, a people who have been formed by a story that provides them with the skills for negotiating the danger of this existence, trusting in God's promise of redemption. In other words, just like those rabbits of Watership Down, the number one job of the church is to simply be the kind of community that is shaped by its story, our story, the story of Jesus. And this leads to his most famous and maybe his most challenging idea. Hauerwas argues that the church isn't called to come up with a social ethic for the world, like a list of policies we want politicians to pass. No, the church is called to be a social ethic for the world. Its very existence as a peculiar people living out the story of Jesus is its most powerful witness. It's supposed to be a living, breathing political alternative to the ways of the world. Okay, so what in the world does this mean for us? For you, as you prepare for ministry right here, right now? It means learning to lead a community that is willing, as Hauerwas puts it, to live out of control. And this slide just lays out that contrast so clearly. The goal of the world, just like those flawed rabbit warrens, is always control and security. The world tries to manage history through raw power, to eliminate every possible risk. But the church, well, we're called to a totally different logic. Our calling is to trust and faithfulness. It's to witness that God is the real Lord of history. And it's to see the stranger not as a risk to be managed, but as a gift to be welcomed. This is what he means when he says that Christians are a people who do not seek to control national or world history, but who are content to live out of control. Now, this isn't a call to be passive or to not care, not at all. It's a call to a radical kind of dependence on God and on the community of faith, rather than on the world's tools of power and coercion. So let's get really practical. For you, as a pastor in Nigeria, this means your most important political task might not be trying to influence what happens in Abuja. Your primary political task is building a faithful local community, right where you are. The church's witness to the nation is its corporate life. It's how we actually care for the poor among us, how we overcome ethnic divisions within our own walls, how we welcome the outsider, how we tell the truth in a society that is often tempted by corruption. Discipleship, then, is all about learning the skills and virtues we need to live truthfully inside the story of Christ in a world that is constantly trying to sell us other, more powerful-looking stories. So, to put it as simply as possible, Hauerwas is arguing that the church's first, most essential job is to be a community so deeply shaped by the story of Jesus that it actually has the power to resist the false stories of the world, the stories of security at all costs, of endless consumption, of nationalism, and to offer a real, living alternative. And so we end with this question for you to carry with you into your future ministries. As you prepare to lead, what kind of church are you going to build? Will it be an institution that simply has a social ethic, a list of approved positions on all the issues, a few social programs? Or will you pour your life into building a community of character that, in its very life together, is a social ethic for the world to see? A community so transformed by the gospel that it becomes a compelling, beautiful alternative to the tribalism, the corruption, and the materialism that can so easily entangle our society. What will you build?